Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome to First Parish Unitarian Universalist of Arlington.
We choose.
We choose.
We choose to be
A liberal religious community.
Welcoming.
Welcoming to all.
We encourage each other
on our spiritual journeys.
Support one another.
Through the changes in our lives.
And challenge the excesses
and injustices of our time.
Called to love.
To love.
To love.
And upheld by joy.
We live our faith.
Friends, let us join our hearts and minds together for a time of prayer and meditation. Let this gathered body here and online breathe as one body, one beating heart. O merciful God, you who know our hearts, you who know our thoughts, you who know our fear, our brokenness, our grief, our anger, and our shame. You who know how hard we work and how tired we can be. You who see our plans and projects for a better life, a better world. You who can sense our longings to be loved, to be healed, to know peace, to be enchanted by beauty. Come to us now and give us what we need. If it be courage we need, give us stout hearts. Awaken in our hearts a tender and stubborn love that shrinks our fears and makes us braver than we ever thought we could be. If it be healing we need, send us healers, those who tend to broken bones and broken spirits, those whose hands and words and skill and presence are a balm, a joy, a grace. May we find healers in all corners of our lives, among our friends, in the places we work, at demonstrations, in hospitals, in the kindness of strangers, and here in this community. If it be wisdom we need, help us to recollect the wisdom we already possess that has guided us through the troubled waters in the past, and enable us to slow down and listen anew for what each day can teach us of life's deep truths. If it be beauty we need, play peekaboo games with us, startle us with beauty in unexpected places and times. Give us this day our daily bread of beauty, sufficient to feed our souls. If it be hope we need, give us a hope that arises from believing in spite of the evidence and then watching the evidence change. And if we do not know what we need, or perhaps do not even know we are needy, let those needs be seen by you and others, and let those needs be honored and met. Give us trust that all will be well and that the bounty of goodness will suffice. On this day, when this community embraces the stewarding of its common life, bless us with a powerful sense of shared needs and gifts. May we see how much we need each other and how much we give each other, how much the world needs us and we need the world. And in that dance of giving and receiving, may we catch a glimpse of your dream for our flourishing. Amen. Let us join together for 2 minutes of silence.
You will pardon me that I picked all uplifting fight tunes for Stewardship Sunday this year. We needed it. I needed it. On Friday morning, I was out on a walk with one of you when I slipped on the ice. A visit to urgent care revealed a broken fibula or shin bone. I broke the same bone last January, but this time the location is higher up on the bone. For now, I am non-weight-bearing, in a cast, and on some amount of pain medication. I am grateful for your patience, your grace, and your support through this. In this moment of history, this personal mishap comes as another opportunity to practice equanimity and steadfastness in the midst of distress, and to remain true to what is important when we are flooded on so many fronts. We shall not be moved. But we shall not be moved. You'll have another chance. 34. It has been 34 days since the presidential inauguration. I do not need to recount the political and global ramifications of these 34 days. I can tell you that I have never seen people as spiritually challenged as we are by these political events. I have heard you speak of the unfolding news in meetings, in pastoral appointments, in covenant groups, and in every Lectio Divina session since January 20th. I hear the anxiety, the uncertainty, the sadness, the powerlessness, and your anger. Some say we have no choice but to engage in massive civil disobedience. And there is talk about a possible general strike on April 19th, the day the American Revolution began 250 years ago. None of us would show up for work, and everything would stop. I am ready and game, as I hope you are. Still others say the most important way to resist right now is in local communities, where we must protect undocumented families, LGBTQ+ folks, and anyone else targeted by the current administration. as a community, we are on call for just that. What I also know is that our liberal values need our attention and our commitment as never before. We must remember what is deeply important amidst the flooding of dangers about us, that love should guide us, that we are called to protect the vulnerable at home and across the globe, and that our neighbors, friends, and strangers are all children of God. We shall. We shall not be moved. "200 years ago, in woods and backwaters, people met, often secretly under the cover of darkness. To keep going, to keep their spirits strong, they sang. They were a people enslaved. They were people who met our profit margin. They were dark and light-skinned, the product of rape and assault. Torn from their families, their loved ones, they endured physical punishment and watched their kin tortured in displays of cruelty. And still, they sang. We shall not be moved. War came, Reconstruction, and with it the backlash of Jim Crow. And still the people sang through indignities of the day and terrors of the night. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, assembled the Freedom Singers in the summer of 1962. Phyllis Martin, SNCC Field Secretary, said, "The fear was tremendous. I didn't know whether I'd be shot at or stoned or what. But when the singing started, I forgot all that. And we sang, 'We shall not be moved.'" We shall not be moved. The tune was taken up by others. "The Union is behind us. We shall not be moved." In 1931, 20,000 coal miners in West Virginia, 20,000, went on strike and sang in rallies and marches and picket lines. The song was taken up in 1934 by workers in textile mills and garment factories. In 1937, the Sharecroppers Union and the United Auto Workers in Michigan plants. Joe Hill, a Swedish immigrant, led Songs for the Industrial Workers of the World, said in a pamphlet, "No matter how good, a pamphlet is never read but once, but a song is learned by the heart and repeated over and over." We shall not be moved. The song was sung by United Farm Workers under the leadership of Cesar Chavez. The words were translated as "No nos moverán," literally, no, they will not move us. And in the 1960s, daughter of a Mexican immigrant, Doesn't that have new meaning today? The daughter of a Mexican immigrant, Joan Baez, took the song to Madrid in following the death of fascist dictator Francisco Franco. The song journeyed back to the Americas and was the last song played on Chilean radio immediately before the military overthrew the democratically elected government of Allende in a bloody coup in 1973. Like a tree that's planted by the water, we shall not be moved. The psalmist of old, thousands of years ago, declared in the very first psalm that those who are good, those who do good, are like trees planted by the rivers of water that brings forth fruit in its season and whose leaves do not wither. Howard Thurman was a theologian, mystic, and mentor to Martin Luther King. Many of you read some of Howard Thurman in a program I led several years ago. Howard Thurman grew up in the Jim Crow South in Daytona Beach, Florida. About him as a small child was the fear of violence and the presence of the KKK. His grandmother would tell the story of a preacher who led a yearly service on the plantation that she had been enslaved. And the preacher would end every sermon with, "You are not slaves. You are God's children." Still, Howard Thurman lived in fear that someone close to him or he himself would be the next to be beaten. And so he sought sustenance where he could. The young Howard Thurman found that sustenance in an oak tree in his home in Daytona Beach. He wrote, "When the storms blew, the branches of the large oak tree in our backyard would snap and fall, but the topmost branches of the oak tree would sway, giving way just enough to save themselves from snapping loose." He continues, "I needed the strength of that tree. Like it, I wanted to hold my ground. I could sit with my back against its trunk and feel the same peace that would come to me in my bed at night. I would reach down into the quiet places of my spirit, take out my bruises and my joys, unfold them, and talk about them. I would talk aloud to the oak tree and know that I was understood." About 3 years ago, my sister died in St. Augustine, Florida. 3 days after she took her last breath, I drove to Daytona Beach to look for that oak tree. And I am glad to say I found it. It still stands grand and magnificent. And I too sat with my back against its trunk. Trees bend in the midst of a storm, and with deep roots, we are able to stand the storm. But there is more to this metaphor. Trees do have roots that go down, but they also go out and connect with each other. A stronger tree will send nutrients to a weaker one to give power to the other tree. They live in community. And there is another lesson from trees. They produce fruit and shade, but not for themselves, always for others. Am I speaking of trees, or am I speaking of us and of First Parish? Today is Stewardship Sunday, the Sunday that we launch the annual pledge drive. Our annual budget is just over $1 million. And where does that money come from? Some from building rentals, some from fundraisers. A bit comes from our endowment. But more than 3/4 of that $1 million comes from our pledges. A pledge is a dollar amount that we each determine, an amount that we each commit to contribute to First Parish over the course of a year. The governing board, our parish committee, takes the total dollars that we have pledged each year to create a budget that the members then vote on at the annual meeting in May. The new fiscal year begins July 1. Hopefully, nearly all of you have received a letter asking for what your pledge will be in the next year. Some folks will be contacted by a volunteer steward. Those stewards will talk to us about our thoughts about First Parish and ask us to make a pledge. And this will all happen over the next several weeks. And then that's it. We don't talk about money like this again. Till next year. Making a financial contribution in support of our religious community is a matter of integrity. In contributing, we each acknowledge that we belong, but also that this community falls within our care. What should you pledge? This current fiscal year, 254 households pledged their support to First Parish. And the average pledge this past year was just under $3,100. It costs more than $3,000 per household to operate our religious community at its current level. Now, some of us do not have the resources to meet such a pledge. And some of us give much more to make this possible. The truth is, we depend on everyone's generosity. Now, most of you know that after nearly 40 years, I am retiring from full-time parish ministry this June. And you might think that's an invitation for me not to pledge. And that might make some sense as I accustom myself to new financial realities. But here's the rub. In the long run, the only way we are going to fight the values that are in such sway right now is in communities such as this, where we are sustained in the work of justice and where we are a beacon to our children and to the vulnerable and all those in need. And so I am increasing my pledge for next year from $6,500 to $7,000. Does that surprise you? Maybe so. Now, you may say that I am married and that allows for such a generous pledge. But the truth is, Charlie and I pledge separately. He makes a pledge, and I make a pledge. We started that before we were married 2 years ago, and have continued, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of a need to compromise. I tell you this because everyone's circumstances are different. Charlie is not a member of First Parish. He is Roman Catholic and finds time most weeks for a communion somewhere. But many a Sunday morning he is with us. Charlie is impressed with First Parish, and he had been slipping cash and checks into the offering plate. But when I explained the pledge system here to him and how it makes budget planning possible, he decided to pledge as well. And he has not given me the liberty to share his pledge. Not everyone is as direct as I am. And I can't see Charlie. Have I embarrassed you yet? There he is, okay. So the question before us, before you, is what will you pledge? How will you contribute to another way of being and thinking in our time? What will you contribute that we might be spiritually sustained through this trying time? That is for you to answer. And as you ponder that, I invite you to look in our chancel. 6 years ago, we dedicated this mosaic. What is it? Perhaps it is DNA or the cosmos. Maybe you see a sheath of wheat or corn or a smattering of glittering stars. The artist who created this mosaic met with a number of us before designing it. I can't tell you what others told her, but this is what I said to her. I think your work should be suggestive and not literal. It should be non-representational, that like our approach to religious questions, all might discern what it is they need. Unless, of course, I said to her, you were to fashion a tree. We can all embrace trees, I said rather arrogantly. There is something about a tree and the lessons it gives to us. And maybe there is a tree there that you see. I want to note that in this mosaic are contributions from many of you. There are shells gathered at Ferry Beach, pieces of sea glass from Star Island, a stone from the Jordan River, a piece of the Berlin Wall, a key to a home in which someone wrote in a note, "It's taken many years, but my son and I finally have a place of our own." In this mosaic are Mardi Gras beads from the youth service trip to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, and a pin from the American Red Cross, for in this sanctuary we regularly donate blood. There is a coin from the homeland of a young Egyptian, a gay man, hosted through the refugee program founded here at First Parish. And there is a brick fragment from a slave warehouse in Montgomery, Alabama. It is us. It is our past. It is our hope. When we dedicated this mosaic, we said, "Behold this community, the commitment of people, each of us, to find sustenance for the journey and to offer sustenance to others, to be guided by love more than despair, by faith more than fear. Behold this meeting house, the commitment of generations who gathered by these crossroads, this burying ground, this place of meeting, to remember what was of greatest import in their souls and their hearts. Behold this sanctuary, a place built out of fire 50 years ago next month. A place amidst the pull of the everyday that people might open their hearts to a spirit within and among them. It is Stewardship Sunday, and it is a hard time in our world. And so let us give that spirits might be sustained and that the world might be put back together with all the beauty of a mosaic. And like trees planted by the water, may we bring forth fruit in its season for others. Amen.